Mm, mm. Come on, Ryan. Dance off. Me and you, bro. Let's do this.
No. No.
Okay, what about a debate?
That sounds like fun.
All right, let's do that then. Hello, interwebs, and welcome to Close Up. I'm your co-host, Joe.
And I'm Ryan.
With Guardians 3 out in a few days, Ryan and I wish to debate an old question about the franchise. Was the first or second movie better? The answer isn't so clear-cut as some of you might believe. Full spoilers ahead for both Guardians films, you've been warned. From this extreme long shot, we zoom into our medium shot. We'll forgo our backgrounds with Guardians, as they're sure to come up in our points, but what's your overall stance on these films?
I think they're great. I remember the hype of the first Guardians movie and me thinking, this is going to be bad. This looks weird. It looks stupid. I'm not going to like it. And I walked out. I was like, damn it, they got me. I liked it. It was pretty good. It expanded the Marvel Universe even more into a genre which it could be silly but also serious at the same time. It was like they made their own Star Wars before they bought Star Wars and had to make something in space adventure and was really good. But yeah, I think these Guardians movies are great, and I'm glad we're going back to when Marvel was good.
Yeah, I think both these Guardians movies are in my top 10 of the MCU, so yeah, I'll be taking a side today, but to be clear, I love them both. So I'm not here to say the other one is trash or tear it down too much. I'm a big fan of both these films. I think it's some of the best the MCU has to offer in general, if only just because they don't feel like Marvel movies. They're really just James Gunn doing James Gunn and using Marvel characters. They feel more independent from the greater MCU, which has always been their greatest strength. They're just doing their own thing out there in the cosmos, and we love them for it. But let's get into our close-up now, start this debate. Ryan will be taking the side of Guardians 2, and I'll be on Guardians 1. Which once again is a completely arbitrary toss-up, because either one of us could have done either one of these sides, so.
Yep.
Alright, so you want to get started, or should I?
You go ahead.
Oh, to be clear
Start with
here.
first.
Yeah, that makes sense. To be clear here, this debate's going to run a little bit differently than our first one did. Our first one was pretty structured, like a debate. Maybe ought to be. But we found that came across a little bit stilted in execution. So this one, we just have a lot of points written down, and we're just going to do it mostly
I don't even
like the
remember
rest
our
of.
first debate.
It was on franchise fatigue.
Oh. Yeah.
Like this was like
That was
episode
very
50.
early on.
This is like episode 15. This was way back. This is episode like 54 now. I don't know. Something like that. But yeah, we kind of came across as stilted, and we like the more free-flowing arguments. I mean, we've done sort of pseudo-debates here and there. Some entire episodes have been kind of debates, like our House of the Dragon one, The Last of Us Part 2, even our Mandalorian Season 3 episode we just did for the last one. But anyway, let's get into this. Enough preamble. So I'll be taking Guardians 1. Guardians of the Galaxy isn't just a good Marvel movie, it's a damn good sci-fi story in its own right. And it's one of the only MCU films with serious rewatchability. I love Guardians 1 and 2, and admittedly like 2 even more than the first, to be honest. But Guardians 1 is a better movie, plain and simple. How do you start? How do you plead? Elevator pitch.
I like Guardians 1. I think it's really good. But it is very much it still has that little Marvel formula where this is definitely an origin story. And it's saying Avengers in space does not give it justice at all. But it has a little bit of that where, okay, this is the first time you're seeing, well, actually, Avengers not the first time you've seen these characters, but in this instance, it's the first time you're seeing these characters. You're getting to know each one of their personalities. And, you know, some personalities gel more well with others than than the other personalities, but overall it's a good way to introduce everybody, where if Guardians 2, you start to take those personalities from the first movie and really expand their characters, give them deeper stories, give them higher stakes. You know, in Guardians 1, I believe it's them taking down Ronan, because he's got the Power Stone, and, space adventure ensues. Where in this one, it's more of a personal story with Peter Quill and his connection to his mother, but mostly his connection to his father, or lack thereof. And as he's trying to get closer to his father, he slowly is losing his other family with Gamora and the other Guardians of the Galaxy. And having that more personal story for Peter, I think elevates it to be a little bit higher than Guardians 1. Whereas in Guardians 1, they had to play it safe, but they didn't really play it safe that much, where in this one, they can really go full on balls to the wall, weirdness and James Gunn-ness.
Yeah. So my first point here, I'll say that, very importantly, Guardians 1 is the superhero movie that proved D-list heroes could be handled with respect and care. I don't know if that had ever been done before. You look at there's a lot of crappy superhero movies that have come out over the years, even with some A-list characters. Even big people like the Fantastic Four have never been done quite right on screen. So how is it going to play out when someone like the Guardians of the Galaxy were, keeping in mind here back in 2014, I'm a superhero nerd. I grew up with comic books and these characters and loved these worlds more than most casual watchers of these movies. I knew who all the characters were before the movies came out. Guardians of the Galaxy was the first Marvel movie that ever came out where I didn't know the characters at all. I don't know if I don't think I'd even heard of them. So that, once again, this is me as a nerd, zero context. I'm going into this as cold as my parents or friends who aren't into this stuff. I had zero expectations. I was just like, can they do this? And then they did, in spades. I still connect with the Guardians characters to this day a lot more than I did with the Avengers going forward, in many cases. And I've heard that the Guardians isn't necessarily a pure adaptation from the comics. James Gunn changed a lot, but once again, a lot of purists might have problems with that. I didn't care. To me, this was just a super fun movie, and maybe they changed stuff, but it proved the D-list heroes didn't have to stay D-list. If you had the right writing, the proper care and respect for the source material, and just didn't treat it like a joke, any comic book adaptation could be a story well told. So it broke the mold in that regard. Finally gave low-tier characters some respect in the greater sphere. So, yeah.
It's a good point.
Yeah. Any comment on that?
But yeah, I agree with you. Where who were these guys? The general population has no idea who the Guardians were before the Guardians movie even came out. And would they even want to care? I mean, almost half the group is a raccoon and a talking tree. And they're the comedic duo, and only one of them says 3 words: "I am Groot." So you're just kind of like, okay, how do you even adapt these guys? Oh, just treat them as actual characters? Perfect. And, I mean, that works, but then you have Groot, who is great, in Guardians 1, but then you get Baby Groot, who is more memeable, more entertaining, and, it's a point for this movie, but it's a point for both movies. The way the soundtrack is used, or James Gunn's choices in music is used in both films, is so well done, where it's, yes, they're catchy songs from maybe the 80s or the 70s, but there's a point to them. He uses the songs as storytelling beats, where I can't remember what the song name is, but it's literally the scene where it's Peter Quill walking towards Ego, and when they're going into the ship. And I can't remember the scene, but it's almost like a narration without it being actual narration. It's telling you what's happening in the scene through the psalm, which is what most music should be doing.
I can't remember
And
what
I think
song
James
was used
Gunn,
in that scene specifically,
Yeah.
but yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
James Gunn
Guardians-
is brilliant in his choices of music and how he uses music to further tell the story.
Now, what I will say is Guardians 2 has a way better soundtrack than the first one. They do use the music way more memorably. Like you said, there was that there's the bit about, I always remember certain moments, like when they had that conversation about Brandy, you're a fine girl, and like how Ego is like, this is the best song Earth has ever produced. And they kind of break it down. I'm like, yeah, I get that appreciation for it. Guardians 2, and that's the soundtrack I listen to myself more often. I don't think I've really re-listened to the first Guardians soundtrack in its entirety since it came out, but I have a CD of Guardians 2 in my car that I play all the time. What I will say, though, is I think Guardians 1 has a better score. And why I remember a lot of these in particular is because back in high school, my music teacher was awesome, and he got us the score for Guardians 1. This is around the time it came out, so it would have been around 2015. So in some concerts for the school, we did play Guardians of the Galaxy music, and the scene for Groot's death scene made one of my friends cry every time we played the song, which was a lot, even in rehearsal. So even just from that one, and it's also got the best opening credits music as well for the Marvel logo. I always thought that was kind of just the default one, and then I realized, oh, they change it up every time, but that one's still my favorite one for when you see the Marvel logo. So just like the Guardians music kind of
That's where it came from? Like the general one that they use, that's where it came from?
I think the first Guardians one has its own unique one. They changed it up a little every time for a while.
But like the main Marvel theme is from the Guardians, is what you're saying.
I think that was the first time I remember it being used consistently. Okay. Like the song they play over the opening logos. They may have changed it a couple more times since then, but whatever.
I know. I just say yes.
Yes. Whatever versions are out there, this one is my favorite one. Anyway.
Okay.
But the score for Guardians 1 is incredible. Still makes me feel all the right things at the right spots. So, and I also want to rebut a little bit. You were talking about Baby Groot, so I'll just this is a bit of a bouncing back and forth. But Baby Groot's great. Baby Groot's great. He's got a lot of great moments. But does he have any moments as good as We Are Groot? Tying it back into the score, the moment when he finally has that the We Are Groot moment when he ties it all together, sacrifices himself, and it's a tearjerker, gets you every time. It's like the Groot moment in the franchise. And Baby Groot, all he's got is adorableness, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but other Groot was actually more of a character.
Well, he's a baby. Can't give him, all those faults. Although it does, I wonder if Baby Groot has the same memories as old Groot. Probably not.
I don't think so.
That'd be interesting.
I think they're different people.
Well, if they expand on that in Guardians 3, we'll find out. Probably not.
Because
he wouldn't be able to explain it. Why am I even asking? Anyway.
Because he had to they had to re-raise him basically.
That's true.
And by the time you get to Guardians Holiday Special, he turns into like a completely different kind of tree.
Oh yeah. He's like more yoked.
Yeah.
In the Holiday Special.
I think Baby Groot's just a different person. Actual Groot's dead. So that was an actual sacrifice.
What I love, and I hate that I'm about to talk about this so early, but what I really love about Guardians 2 and why I think it puts itself above Guardians 1 is the villain. I think Ego, the Living Planet, played by Kurt Russell, is a phenomenal villain. And I think just the way I love villains who try to hide who they truly are at first are manipulative and who are smart about it, and then they get so fed up with not getting their way that they show their true colors, and you see how evil they are. And his motivation for, if you think about it, his motivation for his plan is kind of the same as Rowan. Wow, I keep saying Rowan. Ronin's, where
Ronin the
these people
accuser.
are inferior. Yeah, these people are inferior. They don't have it good. But what if everything in the whole world was me because I'm perfect? Where Ego actually has a point because he is this celestial. He was there from the beginning. He is all powerful. And the fact that there are these other people who aren't, and they're living in agony, but I can make everything better if they are me, because that's my purpose. Why else am I here if it's not to spread the wondrous of me like any good tyrant? But he's got a twisted brain, but that's his focus. Whereas in Guardians 1, it's more of, Daddy doesn't like me, I'm gonna blow up this planet, or he won't blow up this planet for me, but I'll blow it up. Where in this one, it's a bit more complex.
Counterpoint to that, the villain in Guardians 1 is one of the most important. Ronan is really just like the Darth Vader of this thing. He's just the enforcer going to get the main MacGuffin, which is the Infinity Stone, which he's getting for Thanos, which I think this is the first time that we've seen the Infinity Stone really be used to its full capability. And it really sets up, and maybe it doesn't wrap up. It does wrap up in this movie, though. I mean, they contain the Infinity Stone's power, also setting up that Star-Lord isn't entirely human, which is why he could hold it. So that does set up Ego pretty well there. But, so they get the Infinity Stone, they show off its power. They also show the entire time Thanos is going after it. Thanos is the real villain of Guardians 1. He's just kind of hiding in the shadows, getting people to do his dirty work. Everyone talks about Thanos. Ronan's scared shitless of Thanos. Gamora and Nebula are forced to fight each other on Thanos' behalf. Nebula is also his lackey as well. Like, they're all directly under the order of Thanos. They just don't get to fight him.
Seeing Thanos in Guardians 1, like in the movie theater, was shocking. I remember seeing that and being like,
this was the first time he was actually a character.
He would show up. Mm-hmm.
Which is very important, because if Thanos doesn't land in this movie, then how are you going to take him seriously for the rest of the Infinity Saga? Right. Guardians proved that Thanos could work on screen, and he didn't even have to leave his freaking chair.
Mm-hmm.
So
he was
there's
that intimidating.
Also, Guardians 2 had gold people. So there's a demerit.
What's wrong with gold people?
They were just kind of useless. They were kind of a one...
Yeah, but they're gold.
They were a one-note gag.
Yeah, but Guardians 2...
They'll lead to Adam
Guardians
Warlock,
2 had Sylvester Stallone post-Creed, where he's on his acting high, and he's got like 2 scenes, but in the first one, when he says, "You broke all our hearts," I was like, oh no, not Rocky.
Yeah, they had the original Guardians of the Galaxy team in Sylvester Stallone. The original one had the Nova Corps, so that's cool. Which, I don't know a whole lot about the Nova Corps, but
because they get bodied off screen in Infinity War.
Unfortunate. The coolest thing about the Nova Corps is they're basically Marvel's Green Lanterns. They're the equivalent. They're like the Galactic Police.
Oh yeah, I guess.
So that's pretty cool. Also,
I wonder if that will be expanded on in.
Also, that scene where they all where all their ships combined together for like that giant net at the end. That was awesome.
Oh, it's a great end piece in Guardians 1.
Yeah,
for sure.
So the Nova Corps is like the other side faction, and they get more to do than Sylvester Stallone. He's just kind of a cameo.
Oh, dude, this is the weirdest debate. It's like, take this piece of chocolate and then take this piece of chocolate that looks the same and tell me which one's better. It's like, take these 2 really good things and tell me which one you like more.
You like
They're
dark
both
chocolate
delicious.
or milk
They both
chocolate
look the same.
better? Yeah.
Milk chocolate.
Milk
Honestly.
chocolate or white chocolate.
I can't tell the difference. Anyway, we're not talking about chocolate. uh, but in Guardians 2, what I really love is just more of a... I love in the sequel, they're not afraid to expand people's character development. And not just with Peter Quill or Gamora, but literally everybody. Like, Drax gets some character development. Rocket gets a little bit more. You learn more about his backstory. Even freaking Yondu and Nebula. Like, characters you probably were like, oh, they were fun characters in the original, but I didn't really care that much about them. And then you see the dynamic between Gamora and Nebula be expanded upon really, really well. You see Yondu and Rocket bond over the fact that they both had terrible dads. And you just see more of character development, and you see Peter starting to finally trust somebody and trust his father, and he's getting suckered into it and he doesn't even realize it. And there's just this kind of complex way of thinking, like, okay, this guy is my dad, but should I fully trust him? Okay, I'm not going to fully trust him, but he's being tricked into trusting him. And Gamora's being like, hey, you said you weren't going to trust him, and then why are you trusting him? It's like, hey, can you fuck off, bitch? I'm trying to trust my dad. And then there's just that whole... I just like that. And some people might find that boring. It's not, like, visually spectacular. But at the beginning of this movie, they fight a giant slug alien protecting some batteries. And I think that's really well done.
Yeah. I agree. The Guardians 2, to me, the main draw of the movie is the way it deepened the characters. A lot of my favorite Guardians moments are from that movie, but also I wouldn't have cared about them so much in the first place if it wasn't for Guardians 1. I think back to the very first scene of that movie where my expectations took a jagged turn from where I thought it was going. You go into this movie thinking it's going to be a fun sci-fi campy adventure, and the first scene of the movie is Peter Quill's mom dying of cancer in the hospital.
Yeah.
They hit you with that emotional gut punch immediately, and then he gets abducted by aliens. Mm-hmm. But, like, this movie did not go the way I expect from scene 1. The first scene was a tearjerker of Guardians of the Galaxy. The whole franchise started with, like, the mom dying of cancer. And the rest of the movie is, there's a lot of other big emotional beats, too. Like, Gamora and Nebula, they, like, the seeds of their relationship are planted there. They're constantly fighting each other to be Thanos' favorite daughter. So that's complex there. Drax is going after Ronan because Ronan killed his family. He gets his ass kicked a lot, but he's got that single-minded quest for vengeance that he's just got to beat. And I don't really remember Rocket and Groot doing anything that, like, emotionally spectacular.
They're just trying to get, like, the bounty, I think, in Guardians 1, right? Trying to get Peter Quill's bounty. I think so.
But I think that's what I liked about Groot, too, is that he was clearly way more emotionally mature than everybody else. So that when the time came and he sacrificed himself, he was just fine with that because he was sacrificing himself so that they could all keep going and grow. This Groot had already reached the end of his journey. He's just this old wise tree.
If you told me that these two movies or this whole franchise came from a D&D campaign, I would totally believe you. Because there's very much those types of vibes where it's these random characters who don't make sense together come together to defeat this all-powerful villain twice. It rarely makes sense, but there's that kind of vibe towards it and that camp towards it is what makes Guardians special.
That to me is what the main emotional thrust of the first story is. Number 2 does deepen their story in a lot of ways, but I think number 1 is a great found family narrative where all these people who never really found their place find a commonality and a good connection together. Like Rocket and Groot are good together, but they're just bounty hunters who nobody really takes seriously because Rocket's just a small little raccoon who talks way tougher than people think he actually is. So he's got this Napoleon complex. He builds big weapons and talks tough, and does crazy things just to look intimidating. And then you have like Gamora, who's just trying to look good for Thanos. You have Quill, who was abducted from his home as a child, and he kind of wants Yondu to notice him as well. But he doesn't really know where he belongs either. None of these people know where they belong. And like Drax as well. He's just after this single-minded objective because his family was killed. All these people are just sort of floating around in space without direction. And this Infinity Stone gives them all a common purpose to go after, first as rivals for each other, but then when they combine together, they realize that they have more in commonality than they are different. So that's just a really nice story as well, very applicable to most people's lives. I think your friends and the people you find along the way that are commonality with you, they can be just as powerful as wherever you came from if you let them in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
I'm gonna rewatch these movies.
It's a very strong story.
I'm gonna rewatch these movies over this weekend. Yeah, those are great points. This is so tough. Why couldn't we have picked an easier topic? But yeah, what I really like about Guardians, like again, I'm sound like a broken record, but the fact that they were like, hey, we're going to expand the characters of Yondu and the Ravagers and Nebula is a really ballsy move, and I respect it, especially when Yondu is kind of in the first movie. He's built up to be just this absolute asshole who's just so mean to Peter Quill.
True.
And he's just like, I was going to eat you when you were first on here, but they told me not to. Where in the second movie, it's revealed, oh, Ego sent him to capture Quill to bring back to Ego. But when Yondu found out what Ego was doing, he just kept Quill, because Ego, spoiler alert, was murdering a bunch of his children, thinking they were all Celestials or had the Celestial gene. Which for some reason the Celestial gene is recessive, if you think about it, but it doesn't matter there. So in a way, you're like, oh, Yondu did something wrong, but for the right reason. And the reason he did that ultimately became the reason why, excuse me, I just phrased that wrong, but capturing Peter Quill and keeping him
saved him, yeah.
Got him, it saved him, but it also got him excommunicated from the other Ravagers, like the main Ravager Corps. So Yondu lost everything, but he gained something more important in his eyes, which is a really touching story. He said it himself, he's like, he might have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy. And that's such a touching tribute to the character and to him and Quill, and his death scene was so emotional, man. Them flying off into space and him protecting Quill over himself was just, man.
Fireworks light display makes me tear up every time.
I miss Yondu, man.
To Father and Son, the song.
Mm-hmm. And Yondu would not be as good of a character if it wasn't for Michael Rooker. He's such a great actor.
Michael Rooker's one of the most talented performers in these movies, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, in rebuttal to that, I'll say that I think one of the big problems with Guardians 2 is that it arguably tries to tackle too much plot. It's great that they build up the supporting characters, but also, and the main ones as well, but also they're trying to take on a whole lot in this movie. You got Ego. You have like the whole plot line going on that planet. You've also got the gold people chasing them. Then also, Rocket and Yondu are trying to escape the Ravagers as well. And then you've also got Nebula being built up more, and then Mantis and Ego being introduced as well. So you have like 3 different plot lines happening that all kind of converge at different points.
It's like a full season of Stranger Things.
Yeah, and it doesn't always handle it seamlessly. There's just a lot going on, which I appreciate that they tried. But what I love about the first one is that it's very straightforward. It's, here's a MacGuffin, Infinity Stone. Everybody goes after it. It's about the competition to get it, what happens when we do get it. Now that we have it, we're going to try to keep it away from you guys. The team is basically always together, because that's another thing. Because of all these plot threads, they had to separate the team for a large stretch of it, which, like I said, one of the big benefits about the first one is that found family narrative, and then in the second one, they split the family. So not only do they split the family and try to tackle a lot, but there's just less focus. The first one is so focused, so streamlined. It's just like, I can rewatch that movie a million times. This is just a fun sci-fi movie. Whereas the second one, I got to be a little more in the mood for this deeper character study that requires more emotional investment. The first one is just, okay, I can watch this. It's a cool movie about finding a MacGuffin in space.
I hear what you're saying, but that's kind of the point of a sequel, right? Is to up the stakes, up the character growth, and, if you want to up, like, in the first Guardians movie, you can make the argument that Peter Quill is the main character, but they are all technically the main characters, so they should all deserve the same amount of character development and character growth, and the fact they didn't have to do Yondu and Nebula, the fact that they did was ballsy, and I appreciate them for doing that. Does it add a bit to the runtime? Yes, but it helps for the the entirety of the I almost said multiverse saga, the Infinity Saga, which, it's really appreciative, especially in moments in Endgame with Nebula or the different variants of Nebula. It gets confusing, I know. But it's very interesting, and I honestly think the connection between, I think it was a joke at first where someone asked Chris Pratt, hey, who would you want to play your father in the second one? And he said Kurt Russell. And then they got Kurt Russell, which I think is really funny. But just his performance alone is so good. He's so charismatic with Quill, and especially with the audience, because he's Kurt Russell. I mean, he was a huge star in the 80s, still a huge star now. And then when he goes full-on villain, he's super threatening. When he turns into, what's that one guy? David Hasselhoff for a quick second's really funny. When he makes his little cameo. And just their fight scene, you're seeing two gods fight each other. But you have one that's a little bit more childish and has his own personality. I mean,
the Pac-Man.
That one part where comes in the Pac-Man before even Pixels was a thing. Or did Pixels better, can't even remember. But that's really funny, and you just have basically these two Superman-like beings while you're trying to get the younger guys, the smaller people trying to defeat, the gold people again, but then also destroy Ego's brain. It's really well done. And I think you could have easily made Mantis just kind of a one-note villain henchman, whereas she's really complex, where she's very afraid to be around Ego, which we don't find out till the holiday special. Spoilers for people who don't know, is Quill's half-sister, which I think was guessed at in the second movie, but is only confirmed recently. And she's afraid of him, and she has a reason to be afraid of him. And as soon as the first few people who show up look like they can help her in defeating Ego, she's trying her best to get them to help her, even though she has to deal with Drax. And it's just an interesting, because you want to, the way Kurt Russell plays it, he is fully making you trust him. He's coming off that way, but then there's this character in the background who's giving off the vibe of something's not right, but you're not fully telling me.
You want to be both.
Goes down to the basement where you see all the baby skulls, and you're like, Jesus Christ.
You want to be both Peter and Gamora in this movie. You want to be, you want, like Peter, for his father to just, you want to be happy for him, and hey, he got his dad back, and can't this just be a happy moment? Why do we have to ruin it? But also, like Gamora, you realize something's a little off about this guy, and I don't really trust it. But
yeah, for sure.
So they do. I want to double back to something you said about Drax and Mantis. A criticism of this movie is, I think, I don't necessarily like what they did with Drax. This is okay. Well, he was okay in this movie. He was the comic relief of Guardians 2, and that's fine. But Guardians 2 is the movie that started Drax as a joke character. And now I know he kind of defeated his revenge purpose in Volume 1, and there was less of a reason for him to be as serious after that, after they beat Thanos especially. Because Thanos was the real cause of his family's death ultimately, if you're going up the food chain. But just Drax is just a constant joke in Volume 2. And he's funny, don't get me wrong. But he's Drax the Destroyer, and I really liked how serious he was in the first one, and then they just changed him so much in Part 2 and beyond that it's just hard to reconcile sometimes. Which snowballs into the other fact that I think the humor in Part 2 sometimes goes a little too far. There's some jokes that they just won't stop. And once again, a lot of them are funny, but I think about ones like the taser face gag. There's Rocket especially is the main culprit of that, where he just takes something and keeps trying to run with it till he runs it into the ground.
It works with him though. I'll give him that. Where he's like, that's part of his character. He tries to annoy you to death.
Which, once again, these jokes are funny. I laugh a lot in Guardians 2. I love the humor in it, but the first one found more of a tonal balance, whereas the second one was sometimes trying way too hard. It had the heart part right, but the humor was a little bit too much. It started feeling like other Marvel movies in that way, where the humor was starting to superimpose over the other stuff. Not as badly as other, obviously, because the emotion still came through.
It was definitely the start. It was definitely the start of it.
This was also the same year as Spider-Man Homecoming and Thor Ragnarok, keeping in mind, I think 2017 was the turning point for MCU comedy.
Holy shit, what a year.
Yeah. Fantastic year for Marvel movies, but I can see that as the turning point for when they started to take that more comedic tone just as a blanket rule.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, it just goes back to like Drax being like that barbarian character, right? Where he got his revenge in the first movie, and then the real Drax shows up. So I understand the critiques there, but I think just underneath all that is just a big dumb fool who enjoys the little things, especially just straight up saying that some women look disgusting, aka Mantis. Or horrifying, excuse me. Use the wrong terminology there. But even in Guardians 1, yes, he's even Guardians 1, he is I will just to kind of counter that. He's a bit more, I feel, a little one note in Guardians 1 as well, where he's just all angry all the time. And his humor just comes from his lack of understanding social cues. Like, his humor's better in Guardians 1, but that's just because he just doesn't understand it.
And then
whereas in Guardians 2,
What are you doing?
I slice my finger down his throat.
Yeah.
Well,
no.
Like, no.
We're gonna.
It's an expression.
We're gonna kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying, and I like. If we're going off of characters here, I like Gamora. She opens up more in Guardians 2.
Yeah.
And she becomes less of badass hunt. Like, she's still the badass huntress in Guardians 2, but she becomes more of trusting and personality in the second one, where, I mean, I think Quill's the same throughout every movie he's in. Like, he grows as a character, but I don't think he really grows as a character at the same time, where it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Volume 3.
I think I saw a lot of growth by the holiday special. He's very clearly more confident in his role as a leader as it goes on.
Mm-hmm.
But I also like that Guardians 1 gave him a good platform to grow from. That, like, why would this guy be in charge of a team? He's pretty silly. He's a loser. Which reminds me of that Guardians 1 has one of my favorite title card sequences in all of movie history, that I've seen.
It's the best one.
It's so iconic. I just rewatched it before we did this episode. But you see this desolate world, the ship comes on, you see the card 26 years later after he got abducted. You see this scary looking guy with a trench coat and these red eyes walking through the rain and the storm, going like Indiana Jones style into a deserted city. It's all serious, what's going on. And then he takes his mask off and it's just Chris Pratt, throws on the headphones and starts dancing through the rubble to come and get your love. Iconic.
It was so good that they had to reference it in Endgame. That's how iconic it was.
And they also had to try to top it up in Guardians 2 as well. The opening scene is just a dance number, basically, where Groot's dancing through the...
shine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr.
So,
Blue,
like,
I think it is.
Once again, great Mr. Blue Sky, yeah. Once again, great scene, but only because the first one did it so iconic. Without even really trying. It was just, hey, let's reintroduce our lead dancing through the rubble on an alien planet. And it feels really fresh. And it's just like to a 70s rock hit. Like that just set the vibe for the whole movie right there. And it was so amazing right off the bat. Like this movie came in confident, knew exactly what it was trying to be.
Yeah.
And this is
I
right
also
after
love
this...
in that. It's just also good filmmaking where it tells you everything about that character in that scene alone.
Yes.
Where not just the dancing part, but when he goes to get the orb, and then when he's dealing with the other goons, he's like, "Who? Star-Lord, man!" Like he thinks
legendary outlaw.
Of this reputation.
You never heard of me?
And then he's capable of fighting. He gets away on the ship, and then he doesn't realize that there's a concubine there who he forgot was there.
Oh,
which it just perfectly sums up his entire character, and I think it's underrated in terms of filmmaking. About, hey, do you want to know who this character is? This is
was the first movie the one where he joked that if you put a black light on the ship, it would look like a Jackson Pollock painting? Was that the first one or the second?
It's like, your ship's disgusting. Your ship's disgusting. And he goes, "Oh, she has no idea."
Right. Maybe the dirtiest joke.
I remember
Marvel's
hearing
ever
that.
done.
Yeah. Hearing that joke in the movie and everyone going, "Ugh." And all the kids are like, "What's he talking about?" No. Don't answer.
I didn't get it the first time either. I had to look up.
I got it.
I had to look up what a Jackson Pollock painting looked like. And I'm like, oh, okay.
I only know what a Jackson Pollock painting is because it's been referenced so many times in movies and TV shows about how it looks like da-da-da, you know?
I see. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see, what else?
What I also love, I know they're not the Nova Corps, but the Gold People. What I really love about, it does lower the stakes a little bit, but their whole army is a bunch of drones, but they treat it like it's a video game.
Mm-hmm. That is
like
funny.
the Gold People in their little pods. I think that's really funny. And the also I love how their version of hyperspace is like hyperjump, and it opens up this little octagon thing, or maybe that was in the original too. I can't remember, but it's like this little octagon thing, and when they're like jettisoned through instead of. In Star Wars, it's iconic, like the hyperdrive thing, but Guardians was able to make their own version of it, and I think it was really cool.
Yeah. So you're talking about the side villains. That also reminds me of Guardians 1's other side villain is the Collector. So the whole Collector and going into nowhere, that's some really cool stuff. I love seeing all the Easter eggs in the Collector's collection. Benicio del Toro plays a very interesting, neurotic character. He's, he makes a small role in the movie, but he's pretty memorable for what screen time he's got. And one of my favorite scenes, and it also shows the power of the Infinity Stone when it gets loose and blows up and nearly takes the collection with him.
Yeah.
So that
when just
that
a
whole
normal person grabs it.
Yeah, so the Collector feels dangerous for his small role. He plays a pivotal part. It's a memorable role. As a side character, I think he's more memorable than the Gold People for like the B tier villain.
Oh, for
but also
sure.
in that, in that scene, a bit of a side note. I love the bit of improv by Chris Pratt when he's holding out the orb and then he drops it,
That's
which
great.
apparently he actually dropped. And they just kept it in the movie because the way he recovered was just so in character.
He's great at improv.
Yeah. You didn't have to say a word in that one.
The Collector I think the Collector is just such a fun character just because it's Benicio del Toro.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's just an amazing actor. It's going to be interesting to see who is it in Guardians 3? Adam? I think
Adam Warlock.
Adam Warlock. That's going to be interesting. Because he's going to be sent by the Gold People to maybe take down the Guardians. And I have a sinking suspicion that he is going to join the Guardians by the end of the fucking movie. It's going to be a feeling. Or he goes away.
Adam Warlock is one of the core Guardians members in the comics. That's why everyone was so excited when the Gold Lady said Adam, because he's like, oh, finally, we're getting Adam Warlock. Like, he's a key player who's been missing up until now.
Yeah.
So that's
been, what, 6 years? People are like, we've been waiting. Please.
Don't you love how Guardians 3 was supposed to be in Phase 4? It was supposed to come out about 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah.
And then they fired James Gunn.
COVID, and then firing James Gunn, yeah.
Fools. Now he's running DC. And then you let him back to run Guardians 3. Guy got his cake and ate it too.
And then he fired Henry Cavill. Anyway, I'm kidding. Yeah.
We're a little bitter about that here, but I get it.
I was scrolling through like saved Instagram posts, and then the one post of Henry Cavill posting, "Hey, I'm back here. Can't wait to do more," came up. I was like, "Oh," and I had to keep scrolling.
I said it before, but I wouldn't have even cared that they fired Henry Cavill if they didn't just bring him back.
Yeah,
I'd long since...
Well, if The Rock didn't make him come back.
I'd long since stopped hoping too hard that he'd come back, and then they brought him back just to fire him. That's what made it worse. Anyway, what else about Guardians 1 here? Yeah, I thought...
I was gonna bring up a point that like Drax did a dumb thing where he called Ronan to nowhere, and then I remember Drax was like extremely drunk, so
that was
it's not really
he drunkenly called him up for that one-on-one battle, and then Ronan nearly killed him. Which once again, this is a good example of the tonal mixing, right? Because it's kind of funny a drunk Drax calls Ronan, but when he was beating down Drax and threw him into the pool for him to drown, that was taken pretty seriously. Nobody was joking during that scene when things got serious.
Killing your family.
That was also the same scene when Gamora was suffocating to death in space, and then Peter saved her.
Yeah.
Which started their relationship off.
Like, instantly. Actually, technically, he's a Celestial.
I was going to say, that's one of the other hints that there was more to him. Which, okay, here's another criticism about Volume 2, and this is more of a me thing. I was always disappointed that he never got to keep some of his powers after Guardians 2.
I mean, they reference it in Infinity War, but he's not, I'm
like, just because Ego died, why does that have to make your powers disappear too? Is that how genetics works in this universe? Like, my parents die, therefore the stuff that they gave to me is just gone now? Like, what? My dad died, therefore half my genetics don't work anymore.
I have a theory, and that he will be able to tap into it during Guardians 3. Because, yes, in Guardians 2, he is, his powers go away, but that's because he was drawing power from the literal source of Ego, and it was easy for him to do. Whereas in, let's say in 3, he has to look inside himself and bring out the Celestial. I mean, he even referenced it in Infinity War. It was like, I'm part Celestial, or I'm part God, or whatever. Yeah. So that makes me, well, it was like a throwaway line, but
Ego also,
and it would give him the opportunity to, redeem himself after punching Thanos in the face. But, it's fine.
But Ego also specifically mentioned, if you kill me, then your power goes away. Which may have been just a manipulative tactic, but if we're taking him at face value, then he is just powerless now. I guess Guardians 3 will decide it. But for now, I got to assume that he's powerless, which kind of sucks.
It'd be interesting to see.
So that bit disappointed me.
Because
about
like, how
Guardians
else do
2.
you fight? How else do you fight Adam Warlock though? That's what I'm wondering. Like, how else would you defeat him?
You
Through the
make
power of
Rocket.
dance?
You make Rocket build a really good weapon. Yep, that's it.
Good weapon.
You have Groot punch him really hard. You have Nebula do something. And Kraglin do his
Oh
little
yeah,
whistle.
Nebula is on the team now.
And then
Forgot about
Kraglin
that.
do his little whistle thing.
Oh, Kraglin. Kraglin's not the same without. I miss Yondu. I know it's Sean Gunn and he's great, but I miss Yondu.
I like Kraglin.
Yeah. Can't wait to. It probably won't be, but it'd be funny if there's another Kevin Bacon cameo.
I think one was
How
enough for
funny
me.
is
The
that,
fact
that,
that they
like-
did that.
It's so funny that he was such like not a throwaway line, but just part of this character's backstory, and then he was just like, "Yeah, I'll do this whole special."
The great hero Kevin Bacon, who saved his town through dance.
Hmm. So
Which
funny.
reminds me, another thing I like about Guardians 1, I think it's the more quotable of the two. Now, Guardians 2, we've been quoting a lot today as well. I think it is very quotable, but I think Guardians 1's got, like, the movie came out nearly 10 years ago, and I still quote some of those things on a regular basis, I'll say.
Oh God, don't say that.
I know.
I'm scared.
I know, 9 years ago. The movie
Ah.
came out.
We're old.
Yeah, and I still quote it all the time. Like when somebody asks me, like just for example, that one line about, you think it'll be, like, where are we going? Somewhere good, somewhere bad? Bit of both. That's one I always do.
That's true.
I also like bunch of jackasses standing in a circle.
Yeah.
Dance
There's
off,
some
bro.
like funny behind the scenes stuff where when they interviewed Bradley Cooper about it, he's like, it felt really unfair because I got to work off all what they said when they filmed on set, and I just got to improv and talk shit to them all day. It was really weird, but they weren't able to respond because he's in a booth, right?
Right.
It's really funny.
That's interesting.
And
So, I don't
funny
know, what do
on
you-
Guardians Volume 2, when he's in like, he's got like a full beard and like really long hair. And you're like, I wonder what that's for. And then freaking Stars Born comes out.
True. So what do you think about
Which is
the
not a good movie.
quotability of, what do you think about the quotability of Guardians 2? How does it compare?
Well, with Guardian, honestly, it's been so long, I can't remember much from Guardians 1, except the stuff that we've already quoted. And with Guardians 2, all I can really think about is like ego stuff. So yeah, I think Guardians 1 definitely has a bit more quotable stuff, even though I'm not remembering much of it.
Because we're old. 9 years ago is
Yeah, because
so
we're
much of our
old.
lifetime.
Back then, we didn't have Discord. We had to use Skype.
True. Back then we actually had
2014,
to.
What? Middle high
Back-
school?
Back then we had to call people.
Yeah.
Now we
I
had
mean,
text back then.
People barely texted. People barely texted, though. It was mostly, like, social media stuff.
It was like nobody really used Facebook Messenger or anything back then. It
No,
was-
not really. It was. I think it was mostly Snapchat.
that was back in the days
If I'm being
people
honest.
actually posted on Facebook. Like
Yeah,
actually had
it was really
like
funny.
legitimate posts, not just shared articles and stuff.
We lived in that era when we were kids, like actual kids, where you would call someone's home line to see if they wanted to hang out.
On a
Instead of, like, an
landline.
instant message, or on a landline, which some kids don't know what a landline is, which is fascinating and scary for me.
I remember the first time I
Um,
ever saw an iPhone, I had my mind blown. I still remember the first time I saw an iPhone when I was 12.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean you can touch the screen?
And now they're everywhere.
Like, aren't you wrecking it touching the screen? No, you're supposed to do that. What?
Mm-hmm. And little by little, they keep getting rid of all the buttons.
Yep. I also
It's really funny.
I read a funny journal entry of mine from forever ago. It's from back in 2011, and it was talking about how that was the day my school got Wi-Fi installed. I'm like,
Oh wow!
a public building without Wi-Fi? How old am I? Anyway,
Oh god.
so what you got any
be
more to
young.
say on Guardians 1 or 2?
I mean, I just think they're both like phenomenal movies. I think they're really well filmed, and it's hard arguing which one's better because I think tonally they both go into separate directions. Whereas Guardians 1, it's very much an origin story. It's very much an adventure film. It's very much get these bunch of nobodies together to stop the bad guy and ultimately save the day. And at the end of the day, they'll become more than just a team. They'll become family, which is what Vin Diesel always gets himself into. Where in Guardians 2, it's very much of a personalized story for each and every character. It's about, parental loss. It's about abandonment issues. It's about relationships within your family, dissociation, all of that. So to say which one is better is very hard for me because tonally they go this way, right? They go into two different paths.
Yeah.
But honestly, if we're going to talk,
trying for different things.
Yeah, if we're really, I think they're a tie. I think they're just both great.
For me, I've always said that if we're talking about best, it's two different things. We never really specified what we're trying to say it's best at. So for me, I'm going to cheat a little bit as well and say that Guardians 1, I think, is a better movie. It's more, like I said, it's really what it comes down to is that simplicity. It's way more rewatchable. I think I've rewatched Guardians 1 more than any other Marvel movie at this point. Like, I've got a special relationship with it. But I really love the way Guardians 2 deepens the characters. A lot of my favorite moments from that franchise are from Guardians 2 for character moments. So I think Guardians 1 is a better movie, but Guardians 2 is a better Guardians of the Galaxy movie, if that makes sense.
Right.
I like number 2 more, but number 1 is technically better. So.
Right. Gotcha.
Anyway, in terms of this debate, I say they're both great, but Guardians 2 is easier to tear down because it's got a few more problems. So Guardians 1 is a better movie. That's my final statement.
They're both great. That's my final statement.
Yep. All right. Any more thoughts, or do you want to wrap her up?
I hope the third one's good. That's it.
I guess you'll find out.
It's not mediocre.
Yeah. We've been waiting 6 years for it, so it's nearly a legacy sequel at this point.
I think it's got to hit the 10-year or 20-year mark for it to be a legacy sequel.
6 years for a sequel is a pretty long time, though.
Mm-hmm. I mean, how long was it for... No, Star Wars was 3 years. Never mind. I think about it.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, you can find me at Ryan Walker Official on YouTube and on Instagram.
You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at ThoughtPlay Media. Also, check out the Close Up with Ryan and Joe Facebook page for latest updates on the show. If you listen to us in audio, check out our YouTube channel. And if you're on YouTube, find us anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. We hope to see you on the next Close Up with Ryan and Joe, where I assume we'll be reviewing Guardians 3. Till next time. And wish us luck for Guardians 3.